Could Chris Paul begin next season still on the Oklahoma City Thunder? I discuss what is going on, y'all. 5 Sports Talk back at it with another video talking, of course, some NBA here to talk about. One, Chris Paul, who it looks like might still be in an Oklahoma City uniform by the time the season starts. Doesn't look like he's getting his wish of being traded anytime soon. So with that being said, here to talk about this situation, what is going on, why can't the Thunder trade him, and what do I ultimately believe happens with CP3 and this situation with the Oklahoma City Thunder. But before I get into that, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Make sure to go ahead and subscribe. I post daily videos on this channel, so go ahead and turn on my post notifications by clicking the bell icon down below to be notified anytime I post a video. And make sure to also follow me on my social media links down below and on the screen for my Twitter and my Instagram. With that being said, I don't want to wait any longer. Let's get started. So where is this story coming from? Well, basically, Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN reported that trade talks between the Oklahoma City Thunder and other teams for Chris Paul have stalled, and there's a real possibility that he begins this upcoming season still with the Oklahoma City Thunder. So let's get down to the facts, folks, okay? Obviously, after the Russell Westbrook trade, I came on here and I told you guys that Chris Paul will not remain with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Everybody knew that because the Thunder had signaled that they were rebuilding, okay? So, to me, the surprise here isn't, of course, that they were trying to move him, because we absolutely knew they were trying to move him. The surprise here isn't even the fact that the contract is making it difficult to move Chris Paul, because he's got one of the worst contracts here in the NBA, okay? I'm talking about John Wall might only be the player with the worser contract, if that's a word. Russell Westbrook, and again, he got traded for Russell Westbrook. The contract is awful, folks. We're talking 3 years, $123 million, making excess of $40+ million in his late 30s. I mean, it is bad for Chris Paul and that contract. But that's still not surprising. The surprising part is that the Thunder basically are okay with keeping Chris Paul on the roster this coming season. That's where you lose me, okay? Because to me, this makes no sense, okay? And I know about rebuilding because I'm a Bulls fan, okay? So I've been dealing with rebuilds over and over again, and I'm sure other fans of other teams, you know, that are used to this might know what I'm talking about here. But even if you don't, let me explain, okay? The one area you don't want to be in the NBA is mediocre, okay? You don't want to be the Detroit Pistons, the Orlando Magic, teams like that where you're a bubble playoff team with really no bright young stars and no real ceiling, and you're essentially in quicksand, okay? And so for teams that are looking to rebuild, I know the draft lottery system changed and it's not as rewarding as before of tanking. I'm not saying to explicitly tank, but I am saying is that if you're rebuilding, stop trying to put a team out there with old players. If you have young players and they win, so be it. But if you're putting out old players out there that obviously are supposed to be on rosters where they should be on a contender, if you will, you know, like a Chris Paul, like a Danilo Gallinari, like a Steven Adams, that OKC has, then you're not really rebuilding. So to me, OKC is essentially delaying the inevitable. They've signaled they're going to rebuild, but they're basically saying, okay, we're going to rebuild just from now, right now. Let's wait a year. And so to me, that's the part where I don't agree with this at all. Because to me, again, like I said, you're delaying the inevitable. If you're going to break up with somebody, just break up with them, okay? Nobody wants to, you know, waste time being led on and just, you know, have another 6 months of your life wasted. Because to me, it really doesn't make sense. Now, if the Thunder change course and they say, okay, we want to actually not rebuild anymore, fine. But from everything the Thunder have done so far, it has signaled a rebuild, okay? So to me, this is why this doesn't make sense. And again, the article and the report states that, you know, they're having trouble trading with teams because free agency has pretty much ended and most of the rosters are set. Cool, I get that. But there's still teams out there that you can trade Chris Paul to that need point guards, okay? And some of those teams are those bubble teams I talked about, right in the middle, where they absolutely need to do something to get over the hump because they're not really a contender. They're just a playoff team, okay? And I've got a few teams here, and let me list them out for you guys. So again, on my whiteboard here, we've got the contract, 3 years and $123 million, which we know is obviously disgusting. But let's talk about some possible teams, okay? Miami Heat, okay, that was the number one destination that Chris Paul has been linked to, and for good reason. Why? They just got Jimmy Butler, and they really don't have anyone else. A bunch of, role players / young players and guys like Justice Winslow, Bam Adebayo, etc. But Miami's not going anywhere with just Jimmy Butler. Why don't you make a move for Chris Paul? Jimmy Butler is going to be paid a lot of money over the next couple of seasons. He signed a max contract. Philadelphia 76ers. Now listen, I'm not saying the Sixers should do this, but I'm saying if you're OKC, why not reach out to them and see? Because I believe this was brought up on the Colin Cowherd show, where he basically said, why not, call Philly and ask them about Ben Simmons now. And I know Ben Simmons just signed an extension, but we've seen this before. Blake Griffin signed an extension, and the Clippers traded him. So call up Philly and say, hey, listen, you got Ben Simmons, but you have a bunch of bigs around him and a bunch of non-shooters. Why don't you, trade for Chris Paul? We'll give you a couple draft picks, and that's what I pointed out here. OKC might have to attach a few draft picks to move Chris Paul, and now you've got a guy in Ben Simmons you can build around and a bunch of draft picks. Timberwolves, another team. They struck out on D'Angelo Russell. They got Karl Anthony Towns. They desperately need to do something. Indiana Pacers, Victor Oladipo's coming back. I know they signed Malcolm Brogdon, but maybe he can come off the bench. Again, to me, these are, after Miami, it's a bit of a crapshoot, but I'm just giving some examples of teams here where they are pretty much stuck in no man's land, and they're not really title contenders outside of the Sixers. So it would not be the worst idea in the world to trade for Chris Paul. Orlando Magic, they started DJ Augustine last year. Imagine how much better the Magic roster would be when you've got now Chris Paul on a roster with Nikola Vucevic, Aaron Gordon, etc. And I know you would have to attach one of those players, obviously, maybe an Aaron Gordon. But point being is, there have been awful contracts in this league. They've been moved. Timofey Mozgov had one of the worst contracts I've ever seen in NBA history. Timofey Mozgov, if you guys remember him, he played on the Cavs. He was on the Nets and the Lakers. And he got traded. Folks, you can find a sucker every single day. And there's a saying out there, if you can't find a sucker in the room, it's you. Okay, it's usually you. So OKC, stop playing yourself. Trade Chris Paul. Start the rebuild. Stop lying to your fan base. And stop delaying the inevitable. I don't agree with this at all. I hope that Chris Paul does not remain with the Thunder. It doesn't make sense for either side. If the Thunder, let Chris Paul play, or he plays for them this season, they become somewhat competitive, and now you're, getting a worse draft pick. Again, nothing about this makes sense. Even Chris Paul, maybe he just wants to get paid, and that's why he's saying, hey, at least I have a team. At least I'm not Melo and Dwight. But he's obviously not as washed as those guys. Chris Paul is still a very good player. It's just that he's got an awful contract. So to me, essentially, the Thunder need to find a way to move off Chris Paul. I don't care what it takes. Attach a couple of draft picks. Do what you need to do. They messed up by trading away Russell Westbrook for Chris Paul. I made this comment when the trade happened that I thought the Thunder could have gotten a better deal for Russell Westbrook than Chris Paul, and now they're regretting it. This is what happened. So for me, I'm not a fan of this at all. I hope they move off of Chris Paul, and I hope Chris Paul gets to go to a team where he can actually contribute to them winning a championship. So there you have, folks. That's what I think. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below if you agree with me or disagree with me. As always, thanks for watching.